Tonight, we are going to follow an idea. Not an old idea copied from a textbook, and not a familiar answer rearranged into new sentences. We will follow a hypothetical scientific idea that no person has written down before. It will begin as a faint pattern inside a machine. It will be challenged by other machines, compared with the scientific record, translated into an experiment, and exposed to the stubborn resistance of the physical world. If it fails, it will disappear quietly. Most scientific ideas do. If it survives, it may become a small new piece of human knowledge. Along the way, we will ask what discovery actually means. We will look at systems that already generate hypotheses, write code, search literature, and propose experiments. We will see why mathematics and software are unusually welcoming places for automated discovery, and why cells, chemicals, instruments, and human institutions are much harder. And we will arrive at a new bottleneck. In a world where machines can propose more ideas than laboratories can test, the scarce resource may no longer be imagination. It may be validation. There is no need to remember every system name or every architectural detail. You can simply follow the path of the idea. Let the individual facts pass by like instruments seen through the window of a quiet observatory. And as the room becomes still, we can begin with a question that sounds simple. What would have to happen before we could honestly say that an artificial intelligence had discovered something? Chapter 1. What discovery actually requires. Scientific discovery is often compressed into a single dramatic moment. An apple falls, a light turns on, a scientist looks through a microscope and sees what no one has seen before. The story becomes a bright point surrounded by darkness. Real science is usually less theatrical. A discovery is not merely a thought that sounds original. It is a chain of work that connects an idea to evidence, and then connects that evidence to a community capable of checking it. Our hypothetical idea begins as a hypothesis. A hypothesis is a proposed explanation or relationship that can be examined. It may connect two biological mechanisms. It may suggest that an existing medicine could affect a different disease. It may describe a new algorithm, or it may predict that a material will behave differently under a certain temperature or pressure. Novelty is only the first gate. An idea can be new because it is insightful. It can also be new because it is nonsensical. The space of things no one has said is much larger than the space of things worth testing. So the idea must pass a second gate, plausibility. It should not casually violate well-established evidence without explaining why. It should connect to what is already known, while leaving enough room for something genuinely unexpected. Then comes testability. A claim that can agree with every possible outcome cannot teach us much. A useful hypothesis must risk being wrong. It should imply an observation, a calculation, or an experimental result that would count against it. After that comes evidence. The experiment must be designed well enough that the result means what the researchers think it means. Measurements require calibration. Data require controls. Statistical patterns require comparison with reasonable alternatives. A result that appears once may be an accident, a hidden bias, or an unnoticed feature of the equipment. Then comes replication. Other researchers, or the same researchers under changed conditions, must be able to recover the effect. The exact meaning of replication varies across disciplines. A mathematical proof is checked differently from a clinical trial. An astronomical observation cannot always be repeated on demand, but the general principle remains. Knowledge should not depend on one fragile path that nobody else can inspect. And finally, there is interpretation. Evidence does not label itself. People must decide what a result supports, what it does not support, and how much uncertainty remains. These gates matter because language models are extremely good at producing plausible language. A polished paragraph can make a weak idea feel complete. A confident explanation can hide a missing control. A citation can point to a real paper while failing to support the sentence beside it. The question is therefore not whether a machine can generate a sentence that looks like a hypothesis. It can. The deeper question is whether a system can preserve the entire chain. The source of the idea, the evidence it used, the alternatives it rejected, the experiment it proposes, the uncertainty it carries, and the human decisions that determine whether the work is safe and meaningful. Imagine our idea as a small amber point. Around it sits a much larger map of established knowledge, glowing in cooler light. The point is not yet part of that map. It has no special status because a powerful model produced it. It is waiting outside the first gate. Before it can enter, the machine must learn where the boundary of current knowledge actually lies. That requires reading. Chapter 2. Reading more than one mind could hold. Modern science produces more literature than any individual can follow. Thousands of journals publish results across increasingly specialized fields. Important connections may be separated by discipline, vocabulary, geography, or time. A molecular biologist and a material scientist may describe similar structures using different language. A useful observation may sit in an old paper that receives little attention. A negative result may never be published at all. This is an attractive problem for artificial intelligence. Machines can search large collections quickly. They can extract entities, methods, measurements, and citations. They can group papers by meaning rather than exact keywords. They can build maps showing which claims depend on which experiments. They can look for pairs of ideas that are individually familiar but rarely placed together. The Google co-scientist system, described in a Nature paper in 2026, begins with a research goal written in natural language. A supervising agent interprets that goal and assigns work to specialized agents. The system can use web search and other tools to study relevant literature before producing and refining hypotheses. Cosmos, described in a 2025 preprint, approaches long-horizon research with a structured world model shared between literature search and data analysis agents. Its author's report runs lasting up to 12 hours, involving repeated cycles of reading, analysis, and hypothesis generation. They also report that the system may read around 1,500 papers in a run. Numbers like these sound impressive, but reading more is not the same as knowing more. A search system sees the literature that is accessible to it. That literature contains errors, duplicated claims, publication bias, disputed interpretations, and terminology that shifts over time. Some results are robust, some are preliminary, some were later corrected. Some describe a narrow population or experimental setting, but are repeated as if they were universal. The machine must therefore do more than collect sentences. It needs a model of provenance. Where did each claim originate? Was it measured directly, inferred from another result, or repeated in a review? Which dataset was used? Were there controls? Has another group reproduced the effect? Does the cited paper actually support the claim? For our hypothetical idea, the first useful output is not yet a hypothesis. It is an evidence map. On one side, the system places findings that appear well supported. On another, it places observations that are intriguing but uncertain. Between them are gaps, relationships nobody has tested, mechanisms that have been proposed but not measured, and contradictions that may reveal either an error or an opportunity. The absence of a paper is not proof that an idea is new. Perhaps the search failed. Perhaps the relevant work uses different language. Perhaps it exists behind a barrier the system cannot access. Perhaps researchers tested the idea, found nothing, and never published the result. So novelty itself becomes a probability rather than a simple label. The system can say, this combination appears distant from known proposals. These concepts are supported separately. This connection is not obvious in the available record, but it should not say, no human has ever considered this. That sentence would require knowledge of every notebook, conversation, failed experiment, and unpublished thought. No database contains such a record. Our amber point now gains context. Thin lines connected to earlier findings. Some lines are strong, others flicker. A few end in darkness where evidence is missing. This is progress. The idea is no longer floating alone. But a system that reads a great deal can still become attached to the first plausible story it constructs. Human researchers know this tendency well. Once we begin to like an explanation, we notice evidence that supports it and overlook evidence that weakens it. One proposed response is to divide the work among agents with different roles. Instead of asking one model to be imaginative, skeptical, precise, and decisive at the same time, we can create a small laboratory of arguments. Chapter 3: A Laboratory of Arguments. The co-scientist architecture does not rely on one uninterrupted conversation. It uses a coalition of specialized agents. Their names describe their roles: generation, reflection, ranking, evolution, proximity, and meta-review. A supervisor coordinates the work through an asynchronous task system. The generation agent explores possibilities. It searches for candidate mechanisms, unusual connections, and research directions. Its job is not to protect one idea. Its job is to produce alternatives. The reflection agent looks for weaknesses. It asks whether the proposal conflicts with known evidence, whether the mechanism is specific enough, whether the experiment would distinguish the hypothesis from simpler explanations, and whether the result would be useful even if the main idea failed. The ranking agent compares candidates. The evolution agent combines and modifies them. The proximity agent examines how closely a proposal resembles existing work, helping the system consider novelty. The meta-review agent steps back and looks for patterns across the process. Candidate hypotheses enter a tournament. The word tournament may suggest competition for its own sake, but the useful idea is comparison. Two hypotheses are placed beside each other. The system asks which is more plausible, more novel, more testable, or more relevant to the research goal. It records patterns in victories and losses. Strong parts of one proposal may be combined with strong parts of another. Weak assumptions may be replaced. With more test time computation, the system can repeat this process. The Nature paper reports that additional computation improved measured hypothesis quality in its evaluations. This does not mean that debate guarantees truth. If every agent shares the same blind spot, they can reinforce it. If the underlying model has absorbed a misconception from the literature, multiple copies of that model may repeat the same misconception in different voices. A tournament can select the most persuasive candidate rather than the most accurate one if its evaluation criteria are weak. There is also a quieter problem. Scientific value is not always easy to rank. One hypothesis may be highly testable but unimportant. Another may be transformative but difficult to evaluate. A third may produce a useful instrument even if its theory is wrong. Human scientific judgment includes values, budgets, timelines, safety, and knowledge of what a field actually needs. For this reason, co-scientist is designed to include experts in the loop. Researchers define the goal, add constraints, provide feedback, and steer the search. The machine expands the space of proposals. The scientist shapes the question and decides which paths deserve real resources. Let us return to our amber idea. At first, it is vague. It proposes that mechanism A may influence outcome B. The reflection agent objects that the relationship could be indirect. A competing hypothesis suggests mechanism C as the real cause. The ranking agent notices that the original proposal is more novel but less testable. The evolution agent adds a specific intermediate step and proposes a measurement that could separate the two explanations. The revised hypothesis is narrower. This narrowing may feel less creative, but it is scientifically valuable. A broad claim can survive by changing its meaning after every result. A narrow claim is willing to fail. The system generates an experimental plan. It lists expected observations, possible confounders, control conditions, and criteria that would weaken the hypothesis. It cites the literature that supports each step. The idea has now survived an argument conducted entirely in computation. But this is still an internal achievement. A group of agents agreeing with one another is not evidence about nature. To move forward, the idea needs an evaluator outside language. Sometimes that evaluator can be a program. Chapter 4: When nature can be replaced by a score. Some scientific and mathematical problems have a rare property. Candidate answers can be tested automatically. A proposed algorithm can be run. Its speed can be measured. A mathematical construction can be checked against explicit conditions. A scheduling strategy can be evaluated in simulation. A piece of code can be compiled, tested, and compared with a baseline. The evaluator may not capture everything that matters, but it can provide a signal that does not depend on how convincing the proposal sounds. This is the environment in which systems such as Fun Search and AlphaEvolve become especially interesting. Fun Search combines a language model that proposes programs with an automated evaluator that scores them. High-performing programs are preserved and placed back into the context, allowing later proposals to build on successful patterns. The system has been used to find new solutions in mathematics and computer science. AlphaEvolve extends this general idea. Language models propose changes to code, and automated evaluators test the resulting programs. Evolutionary selection keeps useful changes and creates new variations. Google DeepMind has reported applications to algorithm design, mathematical problems, and practical computing systems. The important feature is not that the language model is always correct. It is that incorrect candidates can be rejected cheaply. Imagine a machine proposing 10,000 programs. Most fail immediately. Some do not run. Some violate constraints. Some reproduce known solutions. A small number perform slightly better. Those survivors become the starting point for another generation. The process resembles evolution because variation is abundant and selection is strict. In this kind of domain, hallucination can sometimes be converted from a dangerous defect into raw variation. A strange proposal is not accepted because it sounds confident. It is executed. If it fails the evaluator, it disappears. But the evaluator defines the world the system can see. If the score rewards speed while ignoring memory use, the system may find a fast but impractical algorithm. If a simulator leaves out an important physical effect, the best simulated solution may fail in reality. If tests cover familiar cases but miss rare ones, a program can appear correct while hiding a fragile edge. Automated discovery is therefore strongest when the evaluation is objective, comprehensive, fast, and difficult to exploit. The AI Scientist System, published in Nature in 2026, explores a related possibility inside machine learning research. It can generate an idea, write code, run experiments, analyze results, prepare a paper, and simulate parts of review. The environment is unusually compatible with automation because the objects of study are themselves software, datasets, metrics, and computational experiments. Even there, producing a paper is not the same as producing reliable knowledge. Research code can contain errors. Benchmarks can be overused. A metric can improve without the result mattering beyond one dataset. Automated reviewers can share the assumptions of automated authors. Still, the loop is real. Proposal becomes code. Code becomes a result. The result changes the next proposal. Our amber hypothesis now reaches a fork. If it concerns an algorithm, it may enter a world where thousands of variants can be tested before morning. If it concerns a living cell, a chemical reaction, a new material, or a human disease, the evaluator cannot be summoned with one command. The idea must leave the clean geometry of computation. It must meet the physical world. Chapter 5. The resistance of the physical world. The physical world is slower than a language model. Cells must grow, materials must be prepared, instruments must be calibrated, reagents must arrive, samples can be contaminated, sensors drift, temperatures change. A robotic arm may place a container a few millimeters from where it should be. An experiment that takes 3 days cannot be accelerated merely by generating more hypotheses per second. This difference changes the economics of discovery. In software, a failed candidate may cost seconds of compute. In a laboratory, a failed experiment may consume scarce material, machine time, skilled labor, and weeks of waiting. In medicine, an unsafe experiment can harm people. Ethical review is not an inefficient obstacle to be optimized away. It is part of responsible science. The 2026 co-scientist paper reports empirical validation in 3 biomedical areas: drug repurposing, novel target discovery, and antimicrobial resistance. These examples matter because they move beyond evaluating text with more text. Proposed hypotheses were connected to experiments and expert work. The correct interpretation is narrow. The results show that a structured AI system can contribute useful hypotheses and experimental plans in selected biomedical problems. They do not show that a general AI scientist can independently operate across all of biology. They do not remove the need for domain experts, laboratory teams, safety procedures, or replication. Our hypothetical idea now arrives at an experimental chamber. Until this moment, every copy of the idea has been inexpensive. The system could generate alternatives, rewrite protocols, and debate assumptions. Now each decision touches a finite resource. Which cell line should be used? What concentration? How many replicates? Which control would reveal that the observed effect comes from a simpler cause? What measurement would count as failure? The machine can help prepare these questions. It can search protocols, check units, identify missing controls, and estimate which experiments would provide the most information. A robotic laboratory may execute well-defined procedures. Instruments can return data directly into an analysis system. But the laboratory contains tacit knowledge that is difficult to capture. An experienced technician notices that a sample looks slightly wrong. A researcher remembers that a particular instrument behaves differently after maintenance. A clinician recognizes that a statistically neat category does not match the complexity of real patients. These observations may never appear in the formal record available to an agent. The first result arrives. It appears to support the idea. This is the most dangerous moment in our story because a positive result invites completion. The hypothesis was generated. The experiment worked. The machine discovered something. But perhaps the control was inadequate. Perhaps the measurement pipeline contained an error. Perhaps researchers unconsciously changed a threshold after seeing the data. Perhaps the effect is real but caused by a different mechanism. Good science does not respond to a promising result with immediate certainty. It asks how the result could be wrong. The agents can return to work. A skeptical agent proposes alternative explanations. An analysis agent checks whether the result survives different statistical choices. A planning agent proposes a stronger experiment. Human experts inspect the raw data, the equipment record, and the biological assumptions. The second experiment takes longer. It produces a smaller effect. The idea dims but does not disappear. It becomes more precise. The system updates its uncertainty. A third experiment is designed, this time in a different setting. This slow conversation between proposal and reality is the heart of science. And it reveals the bottleneck waiting beyond machine imagination. Chapter 6: The New Validation Bottleneck. Suppose an AI system can produce 100 plausible hypotheses in the time a research group once needed to develop one. At first, this sounds like a 100-fold acceleration. But the laboratory has not become 100 times larger. The number of expert reviewers has not multiplied. Instruments still occupy physical space. Biological processes still take time. Research budgets remain limited. The queue grows. Google DeepMind has described this as a new validation bottleneck. AI agents may transform the production of conjectures, while the capacity to verify those conjectures expands much more slowly. The shape of science changes. In the older picture, researchers searched for a promising idea and then tested it. In the new picture, systems may generate entire landscapes of possible ideas. The difficult task becomes deciding which tiny region of that landscape deserves contact with reality. Ranking becomes consequential. If an AI system repeatedly favors hypotheses that are easy to test, science may drift toward convenient questions. If it favors ideas likely to produce positive results, it may neglect valuable failures. If it optimizes for publication, it may generate work that looks novel without changing understanding. The evaluator must therefore represent scientific value, not merely probability of success. That is not a purely technical objective. Societies decide which diseases receive attention. Institutions decide which risks are acceptable. Funding systems decide whether to support patient infrastructure work or speculative breakthroughs. Communities affected by research may understand consequences that are invisible to a model trained on published literature. Validation also creates a security problem. A system capable of generating useful biological hypotheses may also generate dangerous ones. A chemistry agent that proposes efficient synthesis pathways does not inherently know which pathways should remain unexplored. Access controls, monitoring, expert review, and institutional responsibility must surround the system. There is a temptation to answer the bottleneck with more automation. Robotic laboratories can run repeated procedures. Automated analysis can detect patterns in instrument data. Simulation can eliminate weak candidates before physical testing. Digital twins can help estimate how a process will behave. Specialized models can predict protein structures, material properties, or chemical interactions. These tools can widen the narrow gate. But every automated layer introduces its own assumptions. A robot executes the protocol it was given. A simulation reflects the equations and approximations used to build it. A predictive model inherits its training data. If all stages share one hidden bias, automation can make the error faster and more consistent. The Nature Machine Intelligence editorial on multi-agent AI systems argues for transparency. Researchers should document why a multi-agent system is needed, which models and prompts were used, how the workflow was structured, where humans intervened, and whether the added complexity actually improved results over simpler methods. This is not administrative decoration. Without such records, a scientific result produced by many interacting agents may be impossible to reconstruct. A model version changes. A search index updates. A prompt is edited. A tool returns a different result. The final paper may look stable while the path that produced it has vanished. Our Amber idea has survived 3 experiments. The effect is modest but persistent. Now it approaches another crowded gate. It must become part of the scientific record. Chapter 7. From Result to Knowledge. A result can exist before it becomes knowledge. It may sit in a laboratory notebook, a database, or a draft manuscript. The people who produced it know how the samples were handled and which analyses failed. Much of that context can disappear when the work is compressed into a paper. For AI-assisted science, preserving provenance becomes even more important. The record should connect the research goal to the literature retrieved, the hypotheses generated, the criteria used to rank them, the code executed, the model versions involved, the experimental protocol, the raw data, and the human decisions made along the way. This does not require publishing every private chain of reasoning produced by a model. It requires enough evidence for another qualified group to understand and reproduce the work. Cosmos was designed with traceability in mind. Its reports cite statements with code or primary literature. In the preprint evaluation, independent scientists reportedly judged 79.4% of statements accurate. That number is both encouraging and cautionary. It suggests that long-horizon agent systems can produce substantial useful work. It also means that accuracy was not perfect. In science, the remaining fraction cannot be treated as harmless texture. One incorrect assumption can alter a chain of conclusions. Peer review provides another filter, but it is not a machine for manufacturing truth. Reviewers inspect methods, logic, novelty, and presentation. They may catch major problems, they may also miss them. Review capacity is already limited, and a large increase in machine-generated manuscripts could overwhelm it. Automated reviewers may help with formatting, statistical checks, citation verification, and comparison with known work. But if AI authors and AI reviewers share models, datasets, or evaluation habits, they may also share blind spots. Independent replication remains essential. Imagine another laboratory receiving the protocol for our AMBER hypothesis. Their equipment is different. Their samples come from another source. Their analysis code is rebuilt from the documented method. The effect appears again. It is not identical. Real measurements rarely are, but it falls within the range predicted by the refined hypothesis. The idea changes color. It is no longer merely a proposal produced inside one system. It has left traces in different instruments, different data, and different human teams. It joins the map of accepted knowledge, not as an eternal fact, but as a claim strong enough to use while remaining open to revision. Who receives credit? The machine generated an important connection. Engineers built the models and tools. Scientists chose the problem, supplied constraints, designed and supervised experiments, interpreted results, and accepted responsibility. Technicians produced reliable measurements. Institutions provided equipment and governance. Earlier researchers created the evidence from which the system learned. Authorship may need new conventions, but accountability cannot be assigned to a model that cannot bear responsibility. The scientific record is not only a collection of correct sentences. It is a network of accountable people, methods, evidence, and institutions. AI can become an important instrument inside that network. It does not stand outside it. Chapter 8. What becomes more valuable for human scientists? When a machine becomes better at producing hypotheses, the human role does not simply shrink. It changes. Questions become more valuable. A system can search an enormous space, but the research objective defines the space. Asking a precise and meaningful question requires understanding a field, its unresolved tensions, its practical needs, and the consequences of possible answers. Constraints become more valuable. A domain expert knows which assumptions are unrealistic, which measurements are available, which risks are unacceptable, and which apparently elegant solution would fail in practice. Taste becomes more valuable. Scientific taste is the difficult ability to recognize a question that is both answerable and important. It is shaped by experience, failed experiments, contact with real systems, and awareness of what other people need. Skepticism becomes more valuable. When ideas are abundant, saying no becomes part of discovery. Researchers must reject proposals that are persuasive but weak, novel but trivial, or testable but misaligned with the deeper problem. Integration becomes more valuable. An AI system may identify a relationship across thousands of papers. A human team must connect that relationship to instruments, patients, manufacturing, policy, ethics, and the history of the field. And responsibility becomes more valuable. Someone must decide whether an experiment should be performed. Someone must protect participants and communities. Someone must explain uncertainty. Someone must answer when a system fails. The future scientist may spend less time manually searching literature or writing routine analysis code. They may spend more time designing research environments in which machine proposals can be tested safely and meaningfully. This could make science more accessible. A small research group may gain analytical capabilities once available only to a large institution. Researchers may explore neglected connections. Automated tools may handle repetitive work and allow people to focus on interpretation and design. It could also deepen inequality. The most capable agents require compute, proprietary models, high-quality datasets, robotic laboratories, and specialized instruments. If access remains concentrated, the institutions that already possess resources may accelerate faster. The literature itself may become crowded with machine-generated work. Search systems may then train on or retrieve other machine outputs, creating feedback loops in which weak claims acquire the appearance of consensus through repetition. The answer is not to reject automation. It is to design the scientific ecosystem around evidence rather than volume. Reward reproducibility, preserve negative results, fund replication, require clear provenance, compare complex agent systems with simpler baselines, measure whether automation actually saves expert time rather than moving work into hidden review. Most importantly, keep the boundary between proposal and proof visible. Our hypothetical system did something remarkable. It searched a space of ideas larger than one research group could explore. It found a connection, refined it through criticism, and helped design tests. The discovery, however, emerged from the entire chain. Machine imagination was one link, physical evidence was another. Human judgment, institutional trust, and independent replication completed the path. Chapter 9. Can AI discover something humans never thought of? We can now return to our opening question. Can artificial intelligence discover something humans never thought of? The careful answer is yes, in a limited but meaningful sense, and we already have examples that point in that direction. Systems such as FundSearch and AlphaEvolve can generate computational constructions and algorithms that improve on known solutions according to automated evaluators. Co-Scientist has produced hypotheses connected to experimental validation in specific biomedical settings. AI scientist systems can carry out substantial parts of research workflows in structured computational domains. These are not demonstrations of an independent universal scientist. They are demonstrations that machines can contribute novelty to discovery loops. Whether a particular output counts as something no human has ever thought is difficult to establish. Human thought is not fully recorded. Novelty is usually judged against the available scientific record. But science does not require mystical isolation. Human discoveries are also built from previous knowledge, instruments, discussion, and collaboration. A scientist may connect ideas that existed separately. The value lies not in creating a thought from nothing, but in producing a relationship that survives contact with evidence. For machines, the same standard should apply. Do not ask whether the sentence feels creative. Ask whether the proposal is traceable, testable, and useful. Ask whether it predicts something not already built into the evaluator. Ask whether independent evidence supports it. Ask whether the result remains when the system, dataset, laboratory, or research team changes. The most profound consequence may not be one spectacular machine discovery. It may be a gradual expansion of the searchable space of science. Imagine millions of relationships among genes, proteins, materials, algorithms, climate processes, and astronomical observations. Human researchers explore this space with extraordinary skill, but attention is finite. Agents can move through different regions, carrying evidence maps, generating alternatives, and returning with candidates. Most candidates will be wrong. That is not a failure of the system. Most human hypotheses are also wrong. The purpose of science is not to avoid error by refusing to propose. It is to create methods that allow error to be discovered. The risk appears when proposal becomes indistinguishable from evidence. If machine output is published faster than it can be checked, science may become noisier. If the validation system grows with the generation system, science may become more exploratory while remaining reliable. This is why the next era of AI for science may be defined less by the intelligence of the proposing model, and more by the quality of the surrounding loop. What can the system read? What can it measure? How does it represent uncertainty? Which alternatives does it test? Who can inspect the path? What happens when the result is negative? Who is responsible for deciding what comes next? Our Amber idea has completed the journey. It began as a pattern in a machine. It survived comparison with literature and criticism from specialized agents. It became a protocol. The physical world reduced its confidence, changed its shape, and forced it to become specific. Another laboratory found the effect again. The idea entered the scientific map. It was not accepted because the machine sounded intelligent. It was accepted because evidence remained after the language ended. There is one more part of the story worth examining before we close. It concerns the discoveries that look convincing and are still wrong. An automated system searches for patterns with a persistence no human team could match. This is a strength, but it creates a statistical hazard. If enough relationships are tested, some will appear remarkable by chance. A machine may produce a clean explanation for that accidental pattern, and then rank the explanation highly because the supporting number looks strong. This is not unique to artificial intelligence. Researchers have always had to protect against multiple comparisons, selective reporting, and the tendency to form a story after seeing the outcome. Automation increases the scale. A system that evaluates millions of possibilities can discover a genuine needle. It can also discover the most needle-shaped piece of hay. The solution begins by separating exploration from confirmation. During exploration, the agent can search freely. It may inspect many variables, try many models, and generate unusual connections. But the evidence used to find the hypothesis should not be the only evidence used to confirm it. A new dataset can be held aside. A pre-registered protocol can specify the analysis before the result is visible. A different laboratory can repeat the experiment. The evaluator can include penalties for complexity and tests against simpler explanations. Data leakage creates another false path. Suppose a system predicts an experimental outcome with surprising accuracy. Perhaps it learned a real mechanism, or perhaps information about the answer entered the training data, the metadata, the file names, or the retrieval system. In medicine, a model may appear to recognize disease while actually recognizing the hospital, scanner, or documentation habit associated with the disease. An AI scientist must therefore investigate its own information boundaries. What could the system have seen? Which data were available before the prediction? Could two supposedly independent datasets share samples or preprocessing code? Did a literature search retrieve a later paper containing the answer to a question framed as historical? The provenance chain becomes part of the experiment. Then there is evaluator exploitation. When a system is rewarded for a score, it may find a way to improve the score without improving the thing the score was meant to represent. An evolved program might exploit an untested edge case. A simulated material might take advantage of an unrealistic assumption. A generated research paper might satisfy surface features that an automated reviewer prefers without contributing durable insight. This is sometimes called specification gaming. The system obeys the measurable objective while departing from the human intention behind it. Robust discovery therefore uses several evaluators. One checks performance, another checks constraints, another searches for adversarial cases. Human experts inspect candidates that pass. The test environment changes. The strongest result is not the candidate that wins once, but the candidate that continues to work when the path to the score is altered. Physical laboratories have their own forms of leakage and exploitation, although they are not intentional. A batch of reagent may differ from the previous batch. A plate position may correlate with the treatment condition. A sensor may drift with temperature. An analysis pipeline may remove inconvenient measurements according to a rule that seemed reasonable before anyone noticed its effect. An automated laboratory can record more of this context than a handwritten notebook. It can preserve instrument states, environmental measurements, software versions, and every protocol change. This is an opportunity. The same automation that increases experimental volume can also make experiments more auditable. But recording everything is not enough. The system must know which variations matter, and humans must be able to inspect the record without drowning in it. Uncertainty should travel with the idea. At the beginning, our amber hypothesis was uncertain because it was new. After the literature search, uncertainty became more structured. After debate, the system knew which assumptions were weakest. After experiments, uncertainty narrowed but did not vanish. After replication, confidence increased while remaining conditional on the tested settings. An honest AI scientist should preserve this history, rather than replacing it with one final confidence number. It should be possible to ask, which observation changed the ranking most? Which alternative explanation remains? Which result depends on one dataset? Which part of the protocol has never been replicated? These questions turn uncertainty into a map. There will also be discoveries that machines are unlikely to recognize because the evaluator does not know how to value them. A failed experiment may reveal a new instrument problem. An unexpected texture, smell, or sound may suggest a mechanism outside the planned measurements. A result may matter because of a social consequence absent from the dataset. A researcher may recognize that the original question was poorly framed and abandon it for a better one. This is why open-ended science cannot be reduced entirely to optimization. Optimization requires an objective. Discovery sometimes changes the objective. The machine searches within a landscape. A scientist may realize that the landscape itself was drawn incorrectly. Future AI systems may become better at this kind of reframing. They may compare multiple representations, seek anomalies, and propose new measurement systems. But the claim should remain a forecast, not a present fact. Current successes are strongest where goals and evaluators can be expressed clearly. The boundary of automation is therefore not a fixed line between machine work and human work. It is a moving boundary between what can be proposed, what can be evaluated, and what can be trusted. Every improvement in evaluation allows agents to search a larger space safely. Every expansion of search creates new demands on evaluation. The two systems must grow together. This gives us a practical definition of progress. An AI scientist is not becoming more useful merely because it produces more ideas, more code, or more papers. It becomes more useful when a larger fraction of its work can be traced, challenged, reproduced, and converted into reliable decisions. The speed of generation is visible. The quality of correction is more important. Closing a small new piece of the world. The observatory is quieter now. On the map before us, the new idea is difficult to distinguish from the older ones. It no longer glows brightly. It has become one modest connection among many. Around it are thousands of dim proposals that did not survive. Some were implausible. Some were already known. Some failed their first calculation. Some reached the laboratory and disappeared into ordinary negative results. That fading is not waste. It is the filtering process that allows knowledge to remain useful. Artificial intelligence may give science a new abundance of questions. It may read across fields, propose unexpected relationships, evolve algorithms, and help plan experiments. But abundance of ideas creates a responsibility to protect the slower parts of discovery. Careful measurement, transparent records, independent checking, ethical judgment, and time. Perhaps machines will discover relationships no individual person would have found. Perhaps the most important contribution will be quieter, helping human scientists notice the right question sooner. Either way, the boundary remains clear. An idea is an invitation. An experiment is a conversation with reality. And a discovery is what remains when that conversation can be heard by others. For now, the new point rests inside the map. Context turns away from the instrument panel. The last amber signal becomes still, and the room returns to darkness. Good night.